Hello, thank you for joining us today for the next webinar in our Law Enforcement Briefing series. I'm pleased to be joined once again today by Michael Crabtree, who will be talking us through how to use the cloud for law enforcement and police purposes. So let's take a look at the agenda we'll be going through today. We'll be starting off with a look at on-premise data storage, before moving on to a bit of information about the differences between the public cloud and the private cloud. We'll be taking a quick look inside a data center, and then we'll be talking you through some use cases where Bedrock have implemented this technology previously. Finally, we'll be looking at Milestone in the cloud and the next steps that you can take. So a quick introduction to Bedrock for those of you who may not have been familiar with us before. We work with organisations that have some of the highest security requirements in the UK, and we have worked with every UK police force. All the work we do is completed with the aim of helping police use technology in a way that aligns with their own operational requirements. We also have accreditations and partnerships with vendors such as Milestone, Bosch, Motorola, etc. That means we can get you any of the tech you need and implement that for you. I'll now hand over to Michael Crabtree, our Senior Technical Architect at Bedrock, who will talk you through the cloud.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, welcome to another briefing, and thank you to Jenny for introducing me this morning. So what we're going to be doing is having a look at quite a few things today, quite a lot of information. So if anybody has any questions or queries they want to ask, they can ask them. And obviously we're quite happy to talk to people as well offline if they want to talk about some things that they are interested in. So I'm going to start with a question that maybe some people have got. Should I be moving my systems to the cloud? And what does the cloud even mean? What is this thing? And as systems and services become more cloud-based, it's really important to understand the benefits and the implications, of course, of cloud services, as well as the difference between different types of cloud networks. And we'll be looking at the different types today, some of the benefits and the challenges of using them for surveillance networks. Most people will have heard of concepts such as platforms as services, software as a services, where applications or even entire systems are provided by the internet, with infrastructure as a service as going as providing entire virtual networks and servers where hardware and other things are managed by a company. So just to start from the beginning, we're going to remind ourselves what an on-premise is like, and I'm sure you're all aware of those because it's pretty much what you all have. So we've got somewhere where you guys will know where that is. There may be in one of your racks somewhere, in one of your server rooms, and you're going to have maybe a recorder, an MVR, maybe some management and database systems. Depending on what you've got, you may have some other tooling such as domain controllers for access, maybe virus protection servers and other sorts of things. And obviously we're aware you may have some other bolt-ons to that, certain servers that do all sorts of things. Bolted onto that, you may have some client devices that are watching that video and interacting with that video. And of course, you've got to get that video in. So you guys will probably have things such as firewalls or other sorts of things with cameras connected, or you'll have all-in-one cameras that use 4G, etc., etc. I think pretty much, hopefully most people on the call will have been using those types of systems or be aware of them. So it was good for us to just have a little look at that and something about the pros and cons of using those types of systems. So they're installed in known locations. They're in places where you know where that stuff is. The operations rooms are often located in the same building as where your servers are, so you don't need internet for your clients to be connecting to your recorders or MVRs. The data is potentially more secure because the location is somewhere you know where it is, and also there can be a comfort in using familiar hardware. Cons, there's that cost associated with the purchase, isn't there? The management, the maintenance of that hardware over time, looking after it, fixing things, dealing with hardware issues, and also that cost of refresh as you get 5, 6, 7, 8 years into a system and you're thinking, okay, we're going to have to replace all of those servers and that hardware. Availability is completely reliant on your own bandwidth, your own internet at those on-premise locations, and storage can be finite, so adding more, getting more so that you can add more cameras in terms of bandwidth and storage can potentially mean either outages to implement on existing systems or even adding completely new hardware on top of what you've already got. So we're going to have a look at the public cloud. We're going to be looking at what that means. So public cloud is a model where computing services, such as servers, infrastructure, are managed by a third-party company, and that it can be shared with multiple organizations using the public internet. It can be sold in different ways, as we said, infrastructure as a service, so that's whole networks and servers can be virtualized. Big providers of that people know of, Microsoft who do Azure, Amazon who do AWS, and of course Google Cloud. You know, it's probably the top three. The top two are pretty much the de facto, as maybe some people would know. Next comes platform as a service, where certain frameworks or packages are used to tailor their needs. Things like that are such as within Azure, you may use Azure SQL as opposed to having your own server with SQL on it. In terms of hardware, you may virtualize hardware such as Fortinet, both within Azure and AWS. So those are platform as a service. And then finally, we've got software as a service, where software may be hosted by that you would normally host yourself. That software is provisioned and it's basically housed by someone else in entirety. Office 365 is a good example. Sage Online, not something you guys use, but in corporate world, it's a big thing. Things like evidence.com as well, that's technically software as a service, you know, because you're using that rather than on-premise servers, software, and other sorts of things that you need to license. They're all examples of SaaS or software as a service. So let's have a look at what that might look like physically or virtually, as the case may be. What we've got here is we've got our public cloud hosted systems, and because you're going to be using specialist things such as Milestone, then you may have virtual machines, and they may have the manager, NVR, mobile, all on these different virtual machines. We may have a virtual firewall in front of all that, either one that's basically Azure, or you may run another VM with, say, a 40 VM on it. We're also going to have domain services because we need to have that authentication. That's usually done via Azure AD. And in this case, we've got a SQL database container, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So connecting to that, we've got secure VPNs in terms of our clients. I've got a single on-site ops room here, but of course this opens up to be able to have multiple ops rooms from different locations, being able to connect into this centralized system. And we've also got those firewalls, again, with those cameras connecting and VPNing in to potentially a 40 VM, or maybe doing something else with an Azure-based system. Some of the pros of that. So the purchase and management and maintenance of that hardware is no longer required. You don't need to be purchasing and making big investments in tin every 5, 8, 10 or whatever you need to do, or when it's broken and then you've got to run around trying to get more equipment to fix it. Access to those systems is no longer based on location or the bandwidth of that fixed location. Resilience can be made more simple with the automatic creation of systems in multiple data centers, or the automatic storing of system information. You know, something like Azure may make 3 copies of a virtual machine or a system and store that for you, and you can roll back. So things like that become a lot easier, and maybe give you a slightly more painless disaster and recovery strategy. Systems can be scalable. Should you need more resources, including storage, then you can expand that as you require it, or in some cases you can actually reduce it as well, of course, if you're not using it the same. Not only can be the pain in terms of cost and time associated with hardware is resolved, but also the maintenance of operating systems in some cases, as I alluded to in the graphic. You don't have to run a virtual machine with a database on it. You can run what's called a container or an application that is SQL, and you will store your database on that. So you're removing looking after that operating system as well. Often no upfront costs either. You're not paying huge costs in licensing and metalwork and the other things that you would need to pay for. You would be paying on a monthly basis for whatever services that you require. So some of the cons of those: sometimes you need training and more training to use an online cloud system. So you need to be able to do specific training, maybe in Azure AD, or there's AWS training and other things. So you may need more training to be able to implement and use and manage those cloud systems. really important factor here is that public cloud is often designed for more traditional IT services because of the way that they price things up, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So systems can be set up in a less than ideal manner, leading to higher ongoing costs. So for example, that database I was talking about, if somebody has the same mindset as a real system, they'll go, okay, I need lots of virtual computers and servers, and I will install things on them like I would have done the real ones. Well, they're going to create a SQL server with all of the pain and the cost and the licensing that's associated with SQL servers. And if anyone is technical and does use and builds those type of systems, you can be calling a couple of £1,000s just for the licensing alone. By removing that and just using SQL as a service, you can get rid of that. So if people just think it in the traditional way, that will potentially mean a higher ongoing costs. Data centers may be in the UK. You can choose them, both for Azure and AWS. But who maintains the system? Do we know? Are they based in the UK? Which sometimes some of the things that your guys look after and use, that needs to be the case. Pricing models can be complicated, so they're based on all sorts of factors, and I've put a few here, such as compute power. How much CPU do you need? How much storage you're going to be utilizing? And really important, how much data are you uploading and downloading? As we said, you know, these are based on traditional IT and things such as what they call on-demand access. So you'll need to do something. You maybe have an accounting package and you will access data when you need it. That's entirely different to you having video data coming in permanently and then coming out almost permanently. So talking to a few teams and a few TSUs and a few other groups, when we talked about cloud, without saying what type of cloud, a lot of things like, oh gosh, we did it and it cost an absolute fortune. We were getting all these massive bills. That's probably the biggest reason why. It can also be based on other currencies as well. So if you're paying in dollars, as we know, the pound tanked yesterday. So therefore your next month's bill will go up. So, and you can't control that. It gives instability to your ongoing costs. So yeah, as much as it's a world away potentially from IT and networks, that day to day is could be a big one. So those are some of the cons of public cloud. So we're gonna have a look at a little private cloud now. What does that mean? What does private cloud mean? It's a model whereby infrastructures, platforms, services, they can be delivered alongside a robust service package as well. It takes away the headache of hardware and software management, the maintenance, any upgrades, dealing with failures, etc., and also that refreshing of systems as they do become end of life. Providers such as Bedrock, you know, we'll do all the overheads, give you guys more time to be doing things such as doing more jobs, delivering better quality video to your teams, and having more time actually working on those things that you need to work on, and not working on the maintenance of back-end systems. So let's have a little look at what a private cloud data center may look like in terms of a network. Now this looks pretty complicated, but essentially you can think of it as two things. One of them is the real stuff. So there are some real items in a data center, and also the virtual systems behind it as well. So the left hand side shows the physical. So we have proper real firewalls, as you might imagine, and we have them double stacked and things like that. And we'll show you that in the image on the right. And we'll also be using things such as the usual traditional things such as switches and things, but they're obviously data center quality and grade to deal with the amount of data and information that is going to be required for a surveillance system. And then behind all that, we've got our server hardware, which we can break up into virtual machines, add and remove resources when required, along with completely separate storage arrays that can be accessed, and we can dynamically assign storage as required. So if you have a look at that on the right hand side and what that looks like, we have certain sets of internet transit connectivity. In a data center, we've got multiple, and we can again scale that up to pretty big sets of connectivity, including connectivity between data centers as well. We do use real hardware. We have proper real FortiGates sat there that will do all of the firewalling, security, VPN connectivity, etc., etc. Again, it's all resilient and HA. That hits our internal switching. And then from there, that will then move into our virtual arena. So we have virtual firewalls, and we have virtual switches and virtual servers and things like that. So then we're in that virtual world, and within that, then we can host the CCTV and other, in this case, we've got NPR as well. We'll be talking a little bit about those types of services shortly, and all those types of networks that we can provision within that virtual world. So what can that give you using this? It can give you all the benefits of a data center in terms of security, that availability, also with the knowledge of knowing where that data has been held. Bedrock has 2 data centers that we have access to, and we're going to be talking a little bit about those data centers shortly, and also who will be accessing that data. That is, in this case, it's our own security cleared staff who have access to that. We've got the ability to create solutions designed for video, leveraging tools such as SD-WAN, which we talked about in another webinar. If people haven't seen it, then just let us know, and Jenny will be able to give you access to that. Give you resilience, not both in terms of your server systems and the availability of those, but also from the point of view of things like cameras and clients as well. The pricing models are tailored much more for video use. They're tailored more around the amount of cameras being connected, the amount of days of storage required, and things like that. We don't charge in terms of bandwidth up and down, or the amount of bits per month used, or terabytes used per month. We don't do any of that. It's a much straightforward model whereby you can actually be able to understand and have a more predicted kind of tie and in terms of budgets as well. Cause it'd be rude not to talk about some of the cons. Actually, some of the cons we found, because of the fact that this can be tailored to whatever you need in terms of requirements, and in terms of maybe amount of bandwidth, amount of cameras, or other systems as well beyond Milestone, maybe tracking, maybe other sorts of things. Some of the kind of things we've had to think about in some of our systems we've created for other people are actually around the video receive points. Is there enough bandwidth for those receive points to be able to receive the data from the data center? As we said, we can have a 10 gig pipe, but we need to make sure that when we're working alongside your IT colleagues, that we plan for the amount of bandwidth that potentially the clients may want to view. So we're going to briefly have a quick look at data centers, what you'd want to look for if you were looking at working with a provider such as ourselves, and what questions you may want to ask us in terms of our data centers. So data centers are generally delivered to up to 4 tiers, starting from tier 1, which may be a room with a rack in it, and with some power and cooling and some internet, and maybe a few redundant and backup components, and that just scales up from there. So tier 2 adds more redundancy in terms of potential downtime they can account for, and other sorts of things, up to tier 3, which is kind of where the main benchmark is you need to be looking for. So tier 3, there's multiple paths for power, so more than one power connection, more than one cooling, so if one breaks the other one carries on, N+1 redundancy, so we've got backups in place either at the same site or at another site. So there's those types of redundancy as well, with a potential, because we're all trying to hit this, what could the potential outage be of 1.6 hours annually. And then we've got tier 4s, and they're the, you're talking massive enterprise, huge things. This is where you're in the world of Azure and AWS in terms of what a data center is, where you've got absolute redundancy for every component. And as you said, with Azure, makes 3 copies of everything. It's that type of thing that you're looking at with a tier 4. So when we look inside the data center, there'll be separate switchgear, separate power, diverse and redundant power, maybe even coming in from different sides of the building, from different places. Redundant internet with huge amounts of bandwidth, multiple pipes, connections that are between data centers, so that we're not relying on the public internet for that type of connectivity. Also, the security. Engineers been security cleared. The use of multi-factor to enter the building, including biometrics, and access to required areas only. so that engineers only get access to the physical spaces where they are allowed to get access to. So that just brings me on to something regarding data centers and data centers that are going to be used to hold police data, and that's a certification called the Police Assured Secure Facilities, or PSF. Our data center is PSF. What that basically means is that we've got a bunch of certifications that tick some boxes, which is ISO 27001. The data center is BS 5979 certified. There's also an on-site police-linked ARC, and it's the only one in the world that meets that BS 5979. It's also physically checked by the National Policing Information Risk Management Team. So they actually come, inspect, physically check the place where it's like. So yeah, and things like the BS 5979 alongside other things designate certain things and recommendations, CCTV, access control, and other sort of security things. So yeah, we're really quite proud of the fact that we do have a facility that is to those standards, and therefore people can, be pretty happy that that we've already set a good benchmark in terms of the security of the information, which is superb. So we're going to have a look at what we have done and delivered already. I'm not going to use any specific case studies, mainly because obviously in this, what we're talking about here is police, law enforcement, and that type of thing, and so we wouldn't share specific, except for if, for example, people were interested in talking to us about some things, and maybe some of our clients may be okay with you making contact with them, speaking to them, maybe visiting their sites and seeing what they've got. So if you're interested in that, then obviously give Jenny a call. There'll be some information near the end where you can get hold of us, and we can certainly look at that and arrange that with you. So instead, we're going to have a look at some of the systems that we've built, but there'll be no specifics to who that is and where that is. So we've provisioned private cloud for CCTV, including the access to live cameras, playback of footage, export of footage to secure storage, and we're going to look at some specifics of that shortly. And the provision of video analytics as well. Video analytics, if you were to purchase and try and house all that, look after it yourself, can be extremely expensive. It requires GPU quite often to be effective and process high amounts of video. Being able to do that virtually means that we can leverage that on demand. So if somebody suddenly wants to process a lot, then we can leverage GPU to be able to do it. And then when somebody else is doing it, we can leverage that GPU elsewhere. So we can be effective in what we're doing and deliver that as a very valued service. We can also provide centralized and robust NPR BOFs as well. So we've been doing that, which are NASPL compliant. Again, those people who work in those areas, the complexity of those systems and the amount of other systems they have to draw from or send to can get complicated. And there's the ownership of all the hardware, again, maintaining it and supporting a complex NPR system. So it's taking that all away and making that a lot more simple, so that the guys who look after the NPR systems themselves, they're looking after it from a software or a day-to-day point of view. They're not having to then deal with all of the other parts of the system. So if we have a look at Milestone and an example of Milestone in the private cloud, we'll see that there's some main components of Milestone. If you use it, you'll be familiar with some of those. Also installed on virtual servers. We do install SQL on a virtual server, a little bit different to Azure, and we also install the management servers as well. Anyone familiar with Milestone know there are ways of doing resilience with management servers. Software and other things make it slightly more complicated. Often they have to be in the same network. Lots of other things that make it not as resilient as you would like. By leveraging these types of systems and using things such as the replication availability through Windows clustering and all sorts of other things, we can make sure that we've got the resilience at multiple locations. We've got the availability from multiple locations to make sure that there'll be no system downtimes if there are any issues. We also have our recorders. We just use Milestone's own failover for that. Again, there are some plugins, and you can talk to us about that because anyone's aware it is generally what we call a hot standby. So it will record to one site and the other one will take over in the event of a failure. But there are some plugins and some other things we can do that mean that we can actually do a little bit more with that. You can come and talk to us about that. And then we've got a mobile server. We've got 2 mobile servers in this instance. And the idea there again is that's for availability, and that can be delivered. So we can have video delivered out onto things like Force IT or to phones and tablets that are controlled by IT. So we've got camera feeds there down the bottom right. So they can come from anywhere, essentially. They can come from towns. They can come from maybe more surveillance feeds. In some cases, we've put in a set of equipment that means you can connect directly into places such as football grounds. Maybe it's a council where you want to get feeds from, and that allows you to walk up with a set of connectivity, plug that in, and be able to get that straight out of there quite easily. We've been doing that for quite a while. From there, obviously, we've got connectivity to the Force ops rooms or CCTV. Sometimes we deliver the internet connectivity for that. Sometimes that's done via the Force IT departments. It will depend on the requirements. And then we've got mobile. So we've got the ability to give browser access to, say, the Force PCs, maybe to mobile phones. Again, all of that is working alongside your IT departments in terms of the policies and procedures and the way that how they want us to work with that. Again, we can leverage SD-WAN, on camera feeds and things to make sure that we reduce the amount of outages that could happen from, say, an internet going down or a 4G SIM going off or those types of things.
Okay, so, Nick, I think we've got a question that comes in that sort of brings us quite nicely to a bit of Q&A time. If you've got 5 minutes,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, that's absolutely fine. We will do a little summary, which is great. I'll leave that up on there and people can have a look at that. But yeah, if we've got a question, that'd be great.
Perfect. Okay, so the question that we've got that's come in actually is what tier are Bedrock's data centers? So obviously referring back to that tier 1 to 4 diagram that you showed. Is that something that's we're in one tier, or is it quite flexible depending on the SLAs needed?
Our data are tier 3 in terms of what we provide. If people said that an N+1 in terms of data is something that they want to go a little bit higher than that, then obviously we can certainly work with people on that. So if people say, okay, I need it in 2 places, but I also like you to back it off to somewhere else or to an IT function or something like that, then that's certainly something we can bear in mind. I think one of the things is within those private cloud type of areas like that is that we have the ability to tailor things to exactly what they require and whatever their requirements are. Which obviously again another big difference between public cloud, which is usually based on blocks of packages and they either fit you or they don't, or you try and fit them. So yeah, ours are all designated tier 3.
Okay, sounds good. So we do have kind of 2 more minutes left for any other questions if anyone wants to pop something in the Q&A box at the side. As Mick was saying earlier, if you do want to get back to us later on with an email reply, I'll be sending out a recording of this webinar later today, and you can reply directly to that email to either myself or to Cara, who I know a few of you have already been in conversation with as well. And we'd be happy to set up a call with you to answer any specific questions you might have. A couple of questions coming in from John. What accreditation GSC is private cloud? Is that something we can answer on this call, Mick, or do we have to?
Probably not. No, I'll have to take that away and have a quick look at it.
Okay. What about evidence? How would that be processed to the CPS? Is that another?
Yeah. Again, that will depend on the kind of how you deal with that already. So, for example, for one customer, they use evidence.com. So they will use Evidence Locker, which is part of Milestone, to essentially lock that information up in secure storage within Milestone. And then when they need that to be processed through to CPS, again, evidence.com, people maybe thought they could use that as a DEMS, but as soon as they got the first set of bills, because they charge you for every piece of storage you use, suddenly people are like, oh gosh, that's really costly. we're going to have to reduce the scope on that. And now a lot of them do use that for just connecting to CPS. So they will use the Milestone plugin for evidence.com, which will allow certain users to be able to upload their evidence into evidence.com, put that into a case and make that available for CPS to be able to get to.
Okay, great. One other question we had was, what version of Milestone have we tried this on? Can you remember off the top of your head?
Okay, I'll take two things. One of them is because that in terms of the question, it will depend which bit of that I've just talked about. So just generally in terms of using the data centers, we used, and I'm probably aware of that because so we've used 2021 R2 as the earliest versions. Maybe some people have said that because they're aware that Milestone now has resilience built into the manager, which is basically one of the other plugins that they've purchased and utilize and leverage. And it is built in. But again, it's what I said, it's layer 2, which essentially means both of your servers have to be on the exact same network in the same building, unless you do something complicated with your network, such as some layer 2 trunking and things like that. But anyway, that's not really the scope of this. So it's in there, it's free in there, and that's great. It can give you some resilience, but it's all in the same space. So yeah, so the actual version of Milestone we can utilize in the data center specifically, somebody was doing a migration, for example, and they said, actually, we can't really change the versions for various reasons. Because the resilience is not part of Milestone or a plugin or anything like that. It's a higher tier above that as part of the operating system / some of the virtual systems. The actual Milestone part of that is in the actual resilience of that is a tier above. It's pretty invisible to Milestone, which is great.
Okay. The other questions that we had are around sort of cost and compliance. So that, though, there's not one single answer to those, is it? It's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
It's not, no. As I said, yeah, obviously I alluded to the fact that the pricing structure is more is simpler and a lot more straightforward than it is. I can say that's certainly something we can explore depending on the requirements, the amount of cameras you have, the amount and the amount of clients that you're trying to deliver that to. Definitely. Compliance wise, we'd have to look at kind of, again, what kind of compliance are you looking at, and we can look at whether or not we've either already got it or whether it's something we need to attain.
Right. Okay. And that's something that, again, you don't get with the bigger providers like Microsoft, like AWS. They, it is what it is, and they're not so flexible. Whereas working with a provider with their own data center, there is that level of flexibility.
There certainly is. Yes. I mean, like I said, we have some of the baselines, such as 27,001 in terms of a principle and a process and a way of doing things is kind of a fantastic baseline, and the BS79 is the one really in terms of security. So the two go hand in hand, then pull together, cover a lot of areas, but we can certainly look at specifics.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mick. I'm going to wrap up there because we've gone slightly over, but that was really useful. Thank you very much.
A few questions, which is great.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for contributing your questions. That was really good.
Yeah, fantastic.
Like
Thank you very much, everyone.
If there's any other questions that you wanted to ask, that something occurs to you later today, please do feel free to reach out to us. Just reply to one of our emails and we'll be happy to set that up for you. Someone asking, can I share this webinar in the Force? Absolutely, we would love it if you want to do that. Like I said, I'll be sending out the link to the recording later today, and please do feel free to share that with whoever you think it might benefit. I will also, Cara will be putting a link up in the chat box there, just to give you a link to register yourself for the next webinar, which will be taking place on the 1st of December. So these law enforcement briefings, we tend to run these once a quarter, and the next one will be 1st of December. So please do follow the link that's just gone up in the announcements if you would like to go ahead and sign up for that one as well. We would look forward to welcoming you back then. So yeah, once again, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for your questions, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you very much.